Hello, I'm Stephanie Kim, coming to you from the LG Digital Studio at Georgetown University School of Continuing Studies. In focus today, leadership in higher education. I'm joined by Dr. Kelly Otter, Dean of the Georgetown University School of Continuing Studies. Welcome, Dr. Otter.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Great, it's a pleasure to have you with us. So, Dr. Otter, you've spent nearly 2 decades leading higher education institutions. What would you say are the most significant trends that you've seen happen over the years?
Well, I think one of the first areas we have to talk about is the advent of technology in higher education. First, from the perspective of the change in infrastructure across all kinds of organizations. So in the 90s, with the advent of the internet, all kinds of organizations, including colleges and universities, had to introduce the internet. They had to rewire the entire institutions, and people started using computers and the internet to communicate in completely new ways. And at the same time, we were experimenting with technology-mediated education, and we're continuing to grow our knowledge every year in this space. So what we're learning is that the technology is a tool that we can use not only to provide people new kinds of access to education and reduce those barriers of time and space, but we're also learning what the true value of using the same time and space is, and how interaction works to facilitate the process of learning. So we're learning a tremendous amount. It's still the tip of the iceberg, but we're realizing that the adult working population, which is a growing population in the United States, is served very well by technology-mediated programs, as evidenced by the huge percentages of growth in these kinds of programs. But also we're learning how people learn better. And we learned that people learn by doing, not by being passive learners. And with the technology and with strong interactive design and excellent pedagogical design practices, we're improving the way people learn, and we're improving learning outcomes. We're improving how we assess the value of those interactions. And we're increasing the number of people who can participate in higher education who otherwise would not have been able to participate in it.
Right. And could you speak to who are the new participants of higher education?
The new participants?
Yes.
I would say largely the people who otherwise had to work full-time, or people whose lives were very structured and they had to be very disciplined and could not afford to take 2 or 3 evenings to go to school. People can now learn when they have the time. They can fit the education into their lives. So evenings or weekends or mornings, whatever works best around their work schedules. So it's primarily that adult learner is getting access to baccalaureate degree completion, as well as graduate professional education and certificates and other kinds of credentials to allow them to improve their own professions, to increase their salaries, to get access to raises, to promotions, to new careers.
Great, that's really great to hear.
Yeah.
So, we've talked a bit about the past, but looking to the future, what trends do you see shaping the future of higher education, and especially as they relate to leadership and change management?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think even continuing the conversation about technology and how technology is causing so many shifts, that along with that, the demands of a knowledge economy are forcing institutions of higher education to think about innovation in new ways. So not only are we thinking about teaching practices and thinking about how we design those learning experiences, but we have to think about the models in which we're providing education and what that content is. And in a knowledge economy, it is just simply not possible to compress everything that students need to know in the traditional structures of a course or a particular semester of learning. We have to think about instead how to help learners learn how to learn, how to evaluate sources of information, and how to assess the validity of certain kinds of information, to be the people who are engaging in the learning process in a critical way, and who are learning how to learn throughout their entire academic and professional life cycles. So our institutions have to think about, how do we do that research? How are we at once paying attention to the traditional structures and the roots of our mission, as well as looking outward at the changes of a knowledge economy and looking at the changes and needs of all kinds of different workforces, and remaining true to that. And then what kinds of staff and faculty are part of that enterprise? How do we to support them? And what kinds of tools do they need? What about the organizational psychology and the organizational dynamics will comprise this very innovative kind of teaching and learning environment?
Wow, truly fascinating. So, a bit of a personal question. What do you think makes a successful leader in higher education?
That's a great question. I think also, referring to the conversation that we were just having about innovation, in my opinion, it's critically important for any leader in any kind of an organization to understand the history, the roots, the culture, the context of that organization. And in higher education, we are we're hearing the phrase now that schools have to be run like a business. And that is a rather controversial statement, because some people feel like the missions of higher education institutions are around the public good, the social good. And at the same time, there are so many pressures on us financially now because of the reduction in federal funding and state funding for higher education. So we're necessarily becoming more entrepreneurial in thinking about new ways that we can produce our own revenues and be more financially sustainable and independent. So as we are thinking about this kind of new level of responsibility for that independence, the leaders have to at once understand the business practices that will lead to financial sustainability, but also be able to manage and support and nurture the culture of shared governance. The mission in higher education is around teaching and learning. It's around the production and dissemination of new knowledge. Whereas in a business, there's the ethos of the short-term goal, which is to produce revenue, to make money. So those are two very different kinds of enterprises that require very different kinds of leadership and different kinds of management. So I would argue that to be a successful higher education leader, one has to appreciate and want to preserve those cultures, but also understand and be able to manage certain kinds of business practices that lead to that kind of financial independence that is a reality for us in the 21st century.
I see. Great. That was very insightful. Thank you. So Dean Otter, thank you for sharing your insights today.
Thank you, Stephanie.
And it's been a pleasure. And thank you everyone out there for watching. Stay tuned for more from the LG Digital Studio at Georgetown SCS.